The Price of Potential, A Family's Betrayal and the Road to Freedom. I was scrolling through Facebook one evening, mindlessly glancing at posts that barely caught my attention, when something stopped me dead in my tracks. A friend from high school posted a photo of their child in a graduation cap, beaming with pride, the caption reading, "So proud of my kid for graduating college debt-free. We set up a college fund for him when he was just a toddler, and it's all paid off." At first, I didn't think much of it. Another humble brag, another perfect family. But then it hit me, like a punch to the gut. A wave of anger and disbelief washed over me, and my fingers froze over the screen. My mind went back, spiraling to a time when I had a future that seemed just as secure. Back when my parents promised me something similar. Growing up, I was always told the same thing. Every birthday, every Christmas, every single holiday, my mom would look at me with that warm smile of hers and say, "This is going toward your college fund, Liam. One day, you'll thank us for it." And I believed her. I never questioned it. I didn't ask for extravagant presents like my friends did. Didn't complain when we didn't go on family vacations. "It's for college," they said, and that was enough for me. I thought that sacrifice, the absence of those little joys, would eventually pay off. I believed that all the money they were saving for me would be there when I needed it. But I was wrong. The first time I realized the truth, I was 17. I remember the day clearly. I was sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of college brochures, trying to figure out which school I could apply to. I casually asked my mom, Audrey, when we could sit down to go over my college fund, how much was left, what we could afford. She paused for just a moment, barely noticeable, before giving me one of those tight smiles that never quite reached her eyes. "We'll talk about it later," she said in that tone of hers. Later came the next day, when my dad, Isaac, and my mom sat me down in the living room. I instantly knew something was off. Their faces were tight, their eyes not meeting mine. Felt wrong. And then they dropped the bombshell. The college fund? Gone. I remember staring at them, waiting for an explanation, but when it came, I couldn't believe it. They had spent it. Not on anything for me, not even a portion of it. No, they had given it all to my younger brother, Noah. The one they always told me was gifted. The one who could do no wrong. The golden child. The one who breezed through school, who was always getting the highest grades, who didn't need to work a day in his life because everything was handed to him. While I struggled to keep up in class, while I worked long hours after school to save for college, Noah was off at expensive tutoring sessions, attending advanced camps that cost more than my entire first year's tuition. I still remember my mom's words clearly. Noah's education was a better investment. She said it so casually, as though it wasn't even a big deal, like I was some obsolete stock already written off. I was furious, but more than that, I was hurt. I had trusted them. They had made me believe that they were building a future for me, that I didn't have to fight tooth and nail to make it. But now I was the one being left to scrape together scholarships, loans, and part-time jobs. And the worst part? Noah didn't even seem to care. When I confronted him, he just shrugged, his face full of that smug arrogance I had come to resent. "It's not my fault you're not as good at school," he said. I can still feel my stomach drop when I think about those words. It wasn't just arrogance, it was entitlement. He believed, without a doubt, that he deserved it more than I did. The room was thick with tension as my parents sat across from me, their faces drawn, eyes nervously avoiding mine. The silence between us was suffocating, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on my chest. I knew something was wrong, something I wasn't ready to hear, but I had no idea how badly I'd been betrayed. When my dad, Isaac, cleared his throat, I braced myself, my heart pounding in my ears. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing at my mom for reassurance before he finally spoke. "Liam," he started, his voice strained, "we need to talk about your future." His words felt like a slap in the face. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself, but I could already feel the ground beneath me shifting. "You know how much we've talked about your college fund?" My mom, Audrey, added, her voice shaking slightly. "Well, it's gone." I stared at them, unable to comprehend what they were saying. Gone. I echoed, my voice barely a whisper. What do you mean, gone? She bit her lip, her eyes welling up with something close to regret. We used it for Ethan's education. He needed it more. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach, and I could feel the blood draining from my face. Ethan, my brother, the golden child, the one who'd always been praised for his brilliance, the one who could do no wrong. I had always known that Ethan was the family's favorite, but hearing it laid out so blatantly, so coldly, it felt like a betrayal so deep I couldn't even breathe. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but instead, I just sat there in stunned silence, letting their words sink in. He's the one who needs the opportunities. My mom continued, her voice filled with a kind of self-righteousness. He's gifted, Liam. We had to put our resources into his future. The words twisted in my gut, their logic dripping with that same favoritism that had followed Ethan his entire life. My mom didn't even seem to notice how she'd phrased it, like my entire future was an afterthought, like I wasn't worth the sacrifice. And you don't think I need those same opportunities? I asked, my voice shaking now, barely able to keep the rage in check. Isaac looked away, clearly uncomfortable, but Audrey spoke up again, her tone defensive. We did what we thought was best. We thought you'd be fine on your own, Liam. You're independent. I almost laughed, the bitter taste of the words sour in my mouth. Independent? I had worked my ass off, scrimping and saving every penny to get through school. I had fought for every opportunity one had, and now I was being told that my struggles didn't matter. And where is Ethan now? I asked, my voice rising. How's he doing with all that money you gave him? There was a long pause, and my mom glanced at my dad, a quick flicker of hesitation crossing her face. Ethan's doing well, she finally said, though her words didn't carry the same confidence they had in the past. He's still in school, still figuring things out. Figuring things out. I couldn't help the cynicism that bubbled up. Ethan had never been in danger of figuring anything out. He was the star student, the one who had everything handed to him, who was never expected to struggle. Meanwhile, I was left here, drowning in student loans, trying to piece together a future that they never had the decency to help me build. The thing that hurt the most, though, was how little Ethan seemed to care. When I confronted him later that day, after the shock had worn off, he barely even looked up from his phone. You really think I had any say in this? He scoffed, his voice dripping with that same entitlement I'd grown so used to. It's not my fault you're not as good at school. Maybe if you were more like me, you wouldn't be complaining. The words hit me like a slap. He didn't even try to hide his arrogance. Didn't even try to pretend like he understood the years of sacrifice I'd put in, the stress, the exhaustion, just to make it. For him, it was just another day, another reminder that everything was handed to him on a silver platter. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. You think this is about school? I said, my voice quiet but firm. No, Ethan. This is about the fact that Mom and Dad gave you everything and left me with nothing. This is about the fact that they never thought I was worth investing in. He just shrugged, as if the entire conversation was beneath him. Well, that's not my problem, is it? And that was it. In that moment, I realized just how deep the divide between us had become. I wasn't just the overlooked son anymore. I wasn't just the kid who had to fight for every little thing. I was the one who had been discarded. Before I share what happened next, the moment that left me questioning everything I knew about family, I want to connect with you, my amazing viewers. Where are you watching from? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. And if you've ever had to fight for something you believe in, hit that like button, because this story is just getting started. The call came unexpectedly, like a punch to the gut. My phone buzzed one Thursday evening as I sat on my couch, the kind of call you don't want to answer but feel obligated to. My mother's name flashed on the screen, and for a moment, I just stared at it, my stomach tightening. I hadn't heard from her in months. Not since my last conversation with her when I told her I couldn't help them. I thought they had learned their lesson, that they had finally accepted the boundaries I'd set. But clearly I was wrong. I took a deep breath and swiped to answer. Hey, Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could already feel the knot in my throat. There was an uncomfortable pause on the other end before she spoke, her voice more fragile than I'd ever heard it before. "Liam, we need to talk. It's important." Her words hit me like a wave, drowning out the rest of the world. Dad's health has taken a turn, and we're falling behind on the mortgage. We don't know who else to turn to. I felt the blood rush from my head. This wasn't just some passing problem. This was serious. My mind flashed to all the times I'd been left behind, the promises unkept, and the way they had ignored me for years. How could they be calling me now after everything? "How much do you need?" My voice was almost a whisper, but I could hear the bitterness creeping in. The anger I had buried all these years began to bubble to the surface. She hesitated. "It's a lot, Liam. We don't know where else to turn." I was quiet for a long moment, processing the words. They needed my help. After all that had happened, after everything they had done to me, now they needed me? I wanted to scream at her, to remind her how they had spent my future on Ethan's, how they had discarded me in favor of their golden child. But I didn't. Not yet. There was one thing I had to know first. "Have you talked to Ethan?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. Another pause. We've tried, but he's not in a position to help." I felt my jaw tighten. Ethan. The same Ethan who had been handed everything on a silver platter. The same Ethan who never had to work a day in his life, who was always praised for his potential, for his intellect. And now he couldn't help them? "Really?" I managed, my voice colder than I intended. "He's living with you, right? I heard he was staying in the basement. How's that going?" I could hear her fumbling for words. "He's struggling, Liam. Things didn't turn out the way we hoped for him." The irony of it all nearly choked me. Ethan, the one they'd invested so much in, the one who had been given every advantage, was now back under their roof, unable to help. And here they were, calling me for a lifeline. I couldn't hold back any longer. "You've got to be kidding me," I snapped, my anger rising. "So after everything, after you drained my college fund to pour into him, he's living with you, broke, and you're asking me for help?" I could hear my mom's voice waver, the guilt in her tone. "Liam, we know we've made mistakes. But we're your parents and we need you now." The words stung more than I'd anticipated. I had spent so many years trying to move on, trying to build something for myself despite the pain they caused me. And now they were calling me to bail them out, asking me to fix everything they had broken. It was too much. Before I could say anything else, I made a snap decision. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice tight, then hung up before I could change my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being dragged back into a life I had worked so hard to escape. They had spent my future on a dream that never came true for Ethan, and now I was supposed to be their savior? That night, I sat in my living room, staring at the walls, the weight of their request crushing me. But it wasn't just their request that bothered me, it was the realization that after all these years, they still hadn't learned. They still hadn't seen me. They had spent my college fund on Ethan, watched him fail, and now expected me to fix everything. To step in and be the good son again. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I called Ethan. He answered with a curt, irritated tone. "What do you want, Liam?" I could feel the tension rising as I asked the question I'd been dreading. "Mom said you're living with them. What's going on?" "They're struggling. Why can't you help?" There was a long silence on the other end, then a sigh. "Yeah, I'm here. But it's not that simple, all right? Things didn't work out the way I thought they would after college." I scoffed. "Oh, really? I thought you were the golden child, the one who had it all figured out." He didn't take kindly to that. "You don't know what it's like," he shot back, his voice defensive. "You always think you know everything. But you don't. You wouldn't be where you were if Mom and Dad didn't pay for everything when we were kids." I could feel my blood boiling, the years of resentment flaring up inside me. "Maybe I wouldn't be in the mess I'm in if you didn't take everything that was supposed to be mine," I snapped. "You were given everything, Ethan. You were given a future, and now look at you. You're living in their basement and you can't even help them when they're in trouble." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, he spoke, his voice laced with anger. "I don't need a lecture from you. I'm figuring things out." "Yeah," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You've been figuring things out for years and look where it's gotten you. Maybe it's time to take responsibility for once." The conversation ended with him hanging up on me, and I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. I wasn't going to be his rescuer. I wasn't going to clean up the mess he had created. I knew I had to stand firm. I wasn't the savior. Not anymore. Before I make my final decision, I want to know, have you ever been put in a position where you were expected to fix everything, even when you were the one who was hurt? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like if you've ever had to walk away from someone who just didn't get it. This story is far from over. The days following my call to Ethan were long and filled with a quiet kind of rage. I had been stewing over everything: my parents' betrayal, Ethan's entitlement, and the weight of the decisions they had all made that had cost me so much. I thought about all those years of trying to make them see me, trying to earn their love, trying to fit into a mold that they had built for me but never truly believed in. And in the end, it became clear I couldn't keep fighting for their approval. One evening, after a long day of work, I found myself staring at the phone in my hand, debating whether I should call my mom back. I knew what I had to say. I couldn't keep being their fallback, their emergency option when things went wrong. It was time to set the boundary once and for all. I dialed her number, taking a steadying breath before she picked up. "Mom," I began, my voice firm, not allowing any room for weakness, "I'm not going to help you. I've told you before, and I'm telling you again. I'm not the safety net. You need to go to Ethan. He's the one you chose to invest in. He's the one who's supposed to have it all together. I've done everything I could, but I'm done." Her silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. There was no plea, no apology, just a heavy sigh, like she had known this was coming but couldn't bring herself to admit it. "You always were the strong one," she finally whispered, her voice laced with regret. "Yes, I was," I answered, the words coming out sharper than I intended. "But I'm not your savior anymore." That was the final conversation. The one that severed the last thread of hope I had that things would ever go back to what they were. I hung up the phone, feeling lighter than I had in years. But of course, Ethan couldn't just leave it there. No, he had to drag me back into his chaos. It started with a strange email from a bank I didn't recognize, followed by a phone call from a collections agency. They were calling to notify me that my name had been used to co-sign several loans. Loans that I knew nothing about. Loans that were now overdue and tied to me. At first, I thought it was some kind of mistake. But then I checked, and sure enough, there it was. Ethan had used my name, my credit, without my consent. He had signed me up as a co-signer for fraudulent loans. Just another mess for me to clean up. I was furious, but I wasn't surprised. This was who Ethan had become. Someone who couldn't face the consequences of his actions. So he used me to hide behind. But this time, I wasn't going to let him. I hired a lawyer, filed a police report for fraud, and began the slow, exhausting process of disputing every single loan he had taken out under my name. As the legal battle dragged on, it became clear that Ethan's financial irresponsibility had caught up with him. He couldn't hide from it anymore. He had maxed out credit cards, defaulted on loans, and now the weight of it all was bearing down on him. He was forced to declare bankruptcy, and soon after, he was evicted from the house he had rented. And there I was, standing on the other side of it all, no longer tethered to the chaos. For the first time in years, I felt free. I thought about everything I had been through, how I had fought to get where I was, how I had built my own life from the ground up, without the help of anyone. My parents had spent my future on a dream that was never meant to be. Ethan had been their golden child, but now he was lost in the mess he had created. While I stood here, solid, self-sufficient, and at peace, I didn't feel guilty. Not anymore. As I sat back in my chair one evening, looking out at the skyline from my apartment, I felt a strange sense of accomplishment. I had done it on my own. I had built a life from the wreckage they had left behind, and now I was free. Free from the weight of their expectations, free from the years of trying to be someone I wasn't, and free from the burden of fixing everyone else's problems. It wasn't a happy ending. There was no reconciliation. No tearful family reunion. No everything is okay now moment. But that was okay. Sometimes letting go is the most powerful thing you can do. I had spent too many years trying to make them see me, trying to make them understand. But in the end, the only person who needed to understand my worth was me. So as I sat there, looking at my life and all the possibilities ahead, I finally knew what it meant to stand strong and to let go.